Well known for his leading role within the Chicago Mafia during Prohibition times in the United States, Al Capone was a legendary Italian gangster. He succeeded in forging his place in American society through illegal business and organized crime. However, Al Capone did not see himself as a criminal but as a gentleman and a businessman. The goal of this documentary is to focus on how this self-defined businessman ruled during times of prohibition in the United States around the beginning of the 20th century. As a son of immigrant parents, how did he forge a place in American society? How did he do his business? First of all, Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in the borough of Brooklyn in New York. His parents were of Italian origin and immigrated to the United States in 1888. There was a massive wave of immigration in America called New Immigration. People felt the desire to escape from low, hopeless poverty and begin a new life in the United States. The Capone family had plenty of dreams when they moved from Naples to America. However, when they arrived on the new land, they were quickly exposed to the criminal world of New York. A few years after Capone was born, his family moved to a better neighborhood on Garfield Street in Brooklyn. At the age of 14, Al Capone was kicked out of school because he had trouble conforming to the rules and slapped his teacher in the face. At this moment, all Al Capone had to do was to hang out in New York City streets. It was his first exposure to gangs. The arrival of the Industrial Revolution created a lot of jobs for immigrants in the railroad and mining industries and in the textile factories. Italians were not afraid to work in those deplorable conditions. Capone was a clerk in a candy store, a pinboy in a bowling alley, and a cutter in a book bindery. However, under his mask of normal citizen, Al Capone had a rebellious side. His personality came to the ear of his neighbor, an important man in the illegal business of New York and Chicago called Johnny Torrio. He became Capone's role model. Torrio was an example that Italians were the brains behind the industry of gambling and warehouse businesses. They were at the head of the Chicago Mafia. New member of Torrio's business, Al Capone did not face prejudice and discrimination because of his Italian origin. Being nourished by his dream of leading his own business, he went to night school in order to improve his accent, which is a great example of social mobility. He changed his clothing to be more attractive and to fit into American business. He succeeded in forging his place in American society even with his Italian roots. How did he get involved in criminal affairs and why was he tempted to develop a career in this world? For a minority of Italians immigrant like him, it appeared that only crime could open the door to the good life. Quickly enough, Capone was suspected of two murders in the city of New York. In 1919, because of trouble caused by his violent nature, Capone was forced to flee New York with his wife and son for Chicago, where he joined Torrio and the real business. Just after his arrival, Al Capone got a job as bouncer for Frankie Yale, the manager of a bar in Chicago. During those years, Al Capone was introduced to the world of alcohol and bars and began to cherish the goal of building a career and earning money since he was not wealthy. In 1925, after Torrio was almost killed, he transferred his interest to Capone, making him the 26-year-old youth the leader of the Chicago's most powerful gang of racketeers. Torrio had given him a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that will assure success and a great deal of money for Capone. With the prohibition that started in 1919, Al Capone needed to be stealthier in his occupation. Prohibition was a measure taken to reduce drinking, and it was now illegal to sell alcohol in the United States. However, by continuing sales of alcohol, he did not see himself as someone who was breaking the law. He stated that he was only responding to a demand of the American population. Somebody had to throw some liquor on that thirst. Why not me? It lasted many years. He was paying to counter each and every law that was an obstacle to his market of alcohol. In order to protect his properties, Capone bought legal immunity by administering bribes to police and politicians. Capone could pay the government over $500,000 per month, so he was a major pillar of the local economy. Therefore, the government closed its eyes to the fact that Capone was selling prohibited alcohol since it received a certain amount of money from these sales. Because of this, the mob, Al Capone's organization, had the monopoly of the business over its rival gangs. He could order his competitors' breweries, gambling joints, and other illegal establishments to be raided and destroyed by his crooked law enforcement agents. Within Al Capone's occupation, it was nearly impossible to differentiate what role he had: a businessman, a politician, or a gangster. In other words, it was almost impossible to detect and prosecute criminals involved in illegal affairs, since they were close to politicians. Capone's activities were also difficult to stop because they were a significant source of income and created many jobs. In order to get a salary over $100 million per year, he refused to conform to the prohibition policy. Somewhat supported by the corrupt local government, the gangster did not hesitate to coordinate the importation of alcohol from different locations, including other states and even Canada. He also built an organized system to deliver the product. He purchased trucks and different bars to distribute it and hired salespeople and bodyguards to do the final transactions. However, Capone did not limit himself to alcohol. The significant profits of his business allowed him to construct more speakeasies, gambling joints, warehouses, breweries, and distilleries within the city and even in the suburbs of Chicago. He was doing most of his business with charm and glamour. He considered himself as a powerful entrepreneur. He said, and I quote, "If I break the law, my customers, who number hundreds of the best people in Chicago, are as guilty as I am. The only difference between us is that I sell and they buy. Everybody calls me a racketer. I call myself a businessman. When I sell liquor, it's bootlegging. When my patron serves it on a silver tray on Lake Shore Drive, it's called hospitality." Capone was not afraid to speak about his exploits to all the reporters he was meeting with. He could feel by his attitude that was proud of himself. Indeed, bootlegging offered a certain kind of dignity. As bootleggers, they provided a useful service and catered to a respectable class of customers. Even though he was a gangster, he gave the impression that his business was a career among many others. Even if he was one of the most notorious gangsters and businessmen of the United States, his fall was inevitable and was created by himself since he liked to take risks. The corrupt government got him, and Internal Revenue Service agents investigated him for income tax evasion between 1924 and 1929. They discovered flaws in his numbers. In October 1931, he was declared guilty for fraud and received a sentence of 11 years in prison. Despite his arrest, he He succeeded in building an empire in America's economic world. He established modern organized crime in Chicago, where were extended to business and organized labor later on. He is an example of an immigrant who succeeded due to his social mobility. Moreover, he made it clear that he did not consider himself as a criminal, but as a merchant of an accessible business. Therefore, Al Capone was a bootlegger, but also a powerful businessman between the 1920s and the 1930s.